Hey everyone, welcome to the DDT Archives. I am your host, Greg. With me, as always, is Chris. What's up, bro?
Hey, what's going on? For those of you curious why Greg is laughing, he just got a look at my tuxedo for today's induction into the ECW Hall of Fame.
Oh, I'm still just wearing basketball shorts. You got all gussied up for me. Thank you for that.
No
It's
problem.
nice. All right. We hope everyone enjoyed our last episode on Starrcade 85, and you check that show out on the WWE Network. But here's a little, like Chris said, it's a little bit different. We're gonna talk about ECW and induct a few people that we loved over the years into the inaugural class of the ECW Hall of Fame. So why don't you, before we get started, why don't you talk about the parameters that of which we set for this Hall of Fame?
So, first off, I want to make sure that everybody understands this is the DDT Archives ECW Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And that means it's the people that we believed are most deserving to be in the first class. There will be more classes in future years. But in this one, we initially said 3 singles, 2 tags, and a valet per person. We walked that back because we thought that would be too easy. So we went 2 singles, 1 tag, 1 valet each. And this made it a little bit more difficult because there's probably a golden dozen in ECW that you could make clear arguments for first class in the Hall of Fame. So if we're only picking 4, it means it's going to stir up controversy.
Exactly. And, we were big ECW fans back in the day, watching it at 1 o'clock in the morning on MSG. It was either Friday or Saturday nights. I don't remember. Which one was it?
I think it was Friday night.
Okay. So, I mean, I would sleep over at your house and we'd kind of sneak and watch it. And it really was ECW was an important company of getting me back into wrestling in the late 90s during the Monday Night Wars because you like anything, you fall off, you watch here and there, but when it came down to like watching things religiously, during that time is getting back into Raw, getting back into Nitro, and then ECW was kind of the weekend break where you could see something that was totally on the opposite side of the spectrum. And we were talking about doing an ECW show. We were looking back at some of these events, and a lot of them are tough to watch. There's not a lot of great collective shows, but there are great performers, and that's was really the genesis of this idea to do a Hall of Fame show. And it's such an important company when it comes down to it. The fledgling company that became a third option in this amazingly boom of wrestling in the mid to late 90s. And so before we get into our Hall of Fame classes, what does ECW mean to you as a fan?
It was the revolution in my fandom. It was something that made wrestling less stigmatized when you talked about it in high school. Like, if you went into high school and talked about Raw, people were like, what is wrong with this dude? But you got with that core group of people that watched ECW. Unfortunately, we were dumb and never took that trip down. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
We were just a little bit too young. Neither of us could drive after 9 early enough to really get it going. And by the time we could afford to go on our own, I was away at school.
But it was gone.
Yeah, it was on its way out. But I mean, it was a revolution. It was a legit revolution. It changed the way everything is done in every company. It made hardcore wrestling cool. Some people nowadays take it way too far. But back then it was violence for the sake of violence. And you enjoyed it. But there was also stories tied into it. And that's the piece that gets forgotten. It's not just how many weapons can I stick in someone. It was, I'm sticking all these weapons into someone because you did X, Y, and Z.
And I think, like you said, that's the forgotten magic of ECW. It's everyone's going to remember the chair shots, the blood, the barbed wire, all that crazy nonsense that went on there, but they really told amazing stories and had some of the best rivalries. It's like, and I know everyone will wax poetic about the Monday Night Wars, and you'll hear everyone talk about how WWE had the great main events, WCW had the better undercard matches, ECW had the better storylines, and it really is almost uncontested. They roped you in, and the way the shows were structured roped you in. You get an hour late at night to tell a story and to give you a little piece here at a time, little piece here, little piece there, and it always worked for me. And there's a lot of conversations that I will remember, but I remember specifically when you asked me if I'd ever seen ECW, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh my God, you got to sleep over this weekend, and we got to watch it. And I did, and I was hooked. From then on, I was hooked. And it was always a challenge trying to stay up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, but it worked out because you watch Saturday Night Live. Once Saturday Night Live ended, you turned on ECW, and then you can go to bed. But so what? Before we get into the specifics, what were your criteria for picking who you picked?
One, they entertained me. That they were more than just bump takers. That they told good stories. That they made a significant contribution to ECW as a whole. They made me want to watch more. The piece that I think you just left out is ECW was an hour-long infomercial.
Yeah.
Like, to make it cheaper to put it on TV, it had to be filmed like it was an infomercial. And in between hawking t-shirts were the matches. And that's awesome.
No, for sure. For me, it was, especially when it comes to my two singles guys, but I tried to keep my honorees that really epitomized what the spirit and the heart of ECW was. And, my two singles inductees really didn't have that much success outside of that company. They were the soul of what ECW was. And like I said, and that's what it was. It wasn't this big corporate giant. It wasn't this money-making machine. It was just, it had heart, it had guts. It was the underdog against two monsters. And it became relatively successful, and it's now a cult legend status. And it was very hard to do and to break through into the the mainstream of what WCW and WWE was. So why don't you kick us off, buddy? Who's your first inductee into the ECW Hall of Fame?
So I'm going to build up to my main eventer, if you will.
Me too.
I'm going to start with my valet. And she is, first off, always with the champ once she is established. She started her career as Stevie Richards' #1 fan and followed around Stevie Richards with Beulah and Raven, which led to quite a few catfights between this woman and Beulah McGillicuddy. Once she left Beulah and Raven and Stevie, she went on to manage the Pitbulls, where she became this dominatrix type to kind of fit with the Pitbull gimmick. She would then leave the Pitbulls to join the franchise and the Triple Threat, which is probably what she was most known for. She did actually have a little bit of a run with Tommy Dreamer as his manager as well, only to turn on him after Tommy won the title for the first time. And after Tommy loses, she low blows Tommy and leaves with Just Incredible. My first induction to the ECW DDT Archive Hall of Fame is the Queen of Extreme, Francine.
There's not much more to say about that. She epitomized the valet of ECW, and she was always around. And she's Tony Schiavone's favorite. We know that. But Francine was just terrific, and not surprising that she would be your first inductee into the ECW Hall of Fame. What else to say? She was always there, and she was always around. Like you said, she was always around the champ. Absolutely. Excellent selection. Welcome to the Hall of Fame, Francine. Any final thoughts on that?
I mean, she had everything going for her. She had the looks. She came off as a badass on top of it. Like she was an alpha woman. Like you didn't want to mess with her.
For sure. So my first inductee is be a valet as well. Probably this. There's a few big names, and this was a difficult selection for me because there's so many of them that were memorable. But she came into ECW in '98, right around the time where I started to discover ECW, and she came in to manage Lance Storm in his feud with Chris Candido and his wife Tammy Lynn Sitch, who would more familiar as Sunny in the WWF. She would take the name Dawn Marie Bitch to spite Tammy, but she would later drop the bitch and become my first inductee into the DDT Archives ECW Hall of Fame, and that's Dawn Marie. She would team up with Storm and Just Incredible and form the Impact Players, which she and managed them to 2 tag team championships. Her other tag team was Johnny later on as Johnny Swinger and Simon Diamond, which you see how far they had fallen with the talent pool there. And she remained with ECW until it folded, and she would announce matches. Honestly, for WWE fans, she's probably most famous for sexing Tori Wilson's dad to death in their angle in the WWE. But Dawn Marie is my valet. What do you think about that?
When you told me that pick, that was super surprising.
Really?
I thought you were going to go a different way, and I guess we'll see if that person makes it into year 2's Hall of Fame. I don't want to bring up that person's name because they're not Hall of Fame worthy in year 1.
Yeah, I changed my mind, and I'll tell you why. Because I picked Dawn Marie too because I'm looking at my window of when I really watched it all the time, and she was there. She wasn't really there in the early days when I didn't see a lot of ECW. Like looking back, it's there were people that had been there longer, had more, maybe a bigger resume when it came to ECW. But when I think of the window of time that I watched this company, she was always there, and I was always a fan of hers, and that's why I picked her.
Hey, listen, I'm not saying it wasn't a good pick. It wasn't where I thought you were going to go. I thought
That's
she
fair.
definitely made major contributions. I enjoyed Simon and Swinger. I don't know why you didn't. I mean, I didn't take them seriously. Even to today, if you watch Impact Wrestling, Swinger is still doing Swinger things. And listen, I have a soft spot for Swinger because he trained our good buddy Hawk Thomas, who, if you're out there somewhere, my man, reach back out. We haven't heard from you in years, and we miss you. I did enjoy that group, but in terms of Storm, I mean, the dude was phenomenal. And he was managed by Dawn Marie. And she helped bring out the cool factor in Lance Storm because he's not known for his promos.
Yeah. No, for sure. Honestly. Absolutely. So, okay, who's next on your list?
So I'm going to go tag team because I love me some tag team wrestling. And I'm going to go with the 3-time tag team champions. They're known for their major feuds with the Pitbulls and the Gangstas. At some point, because of injuries, one of their members will team with New Jack as the Gangstanators, which is awesome. And that's John Cronus and Perry Saturn, the Eliminators.
Love it.
And the reason why I picked them, and there are some really solid tag teams in ECW. And for the record, I want this known. I picked the Eliminators first. I said to Gregg, this is my tag team. So it wasn't negotiated out, well, you talk about one, I'll talk about a different one.
No, you know what? It was a very gift of the Magi kind of moment where I was going to. Yeah, it was weird. We kind of thought the same thing about each other. And it ended up working out. But yeah, it was like, I thought I was. Never mind. It worked out where you were able to use the Eliminators because I love them. And it's probably my favorite finish for a tag team ever.
Absolutely. Total elimination is great. I mean, it's used today. I mean, the Ascension used it.
They're tremendous. Tremendous tag team. Incredibly athletic. Told great stories. Had great matches. Just almost a forgotten great tag team.
Injuries hurt them. You know, when Saturn tore his ACL, it definitely put a damper on it. But again, they had long running feuds with different tag teams, and it was really exciting to be an ECW fan. You know, like that 1 hour show, you just hoped you got a shot of the Eliminators having a great tag team match, putting on a show.
Absolutely. Awesome. Any other thoughts on them?
If you don't like my pick, don't at me.
How could you not like that pick? If you don't like that pick, you don't know shit about tag team wrestling. How about that?
Or ECW as a whole.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And my next pick is a singles competitor. It's near and dear to my heart because it is the iconic underdog story. He is a one-time ECW World Champion, a two-time ECW Television Champion, a three-time ECW Tag Team Champion, twice with Cactus Jack and once with Tajiri. He is the first ever, and I love stats, and you know me, I love stats and nuggets of information and trivia. He is the first ever ECW Triple Crown winner. And that is the man himself, Mikey Whipwreck. And I adored Mikey Whipwreck in ECW. I wish he could have had success outside of the company, but here's a guy that he was part of the ring crew, and these guys would set up the ring and work for free, and in exchange for their services, they'd be allowed to run around in the ring and try some stuff out. And the true story is better than fiction. ECW announcer Joey Styles sees him, says to Paul Heyman, "Hey, take a look at this guy." And Heyman offers him a job, and he's trained by Mick Foley. Can't get a better guy to train you than that. And, he was an enhancement talent that had a character, but rose above all of that and was kind of like this unlikely cult hero. And you just loved watching him get his ass beat. And he was entertaining, and you just rooted for him because he had no business being there. And I love how fans will talk about like, well, this guy doesn't deserve this. He's shoved down our throats and all this stuff. And this guy had no earthly business being in the main event, but he was, and he parlayed that into being a world champ. And he was like 21 at the time when he won it. It's an amazing story that you could probably make a movie out of. And it's true. And also, he's credited with innovating one of the most iconic finishing moves in the history of wrestling, the whippersnapper, which is the Stone Cold Stunner. Think about that. So I love Mikey Whipwreck, and I think he's ECW was the underdog company. He was the underdog performer. How do you feel about that?
I couldn't agree with you more about his place in the Hall of Fame. His character evolved so much, and his underdog self got him over with the fans. I think his best work was tagging with Tajiri with Father James Mitchell, with his fire engine red hair, just being a lunatic. I thought that the evolution of him just showed who he was as a performer. You saw him grow to be comfortable as a performer. Um, you never forget Joey Styles on commentary going, "Look, Mikey, he likes it."
Yeah.
Like the old school commercials for Ovaltine.
It was Life cereal.
Was it?
Yes.
I think it was Ovaltine first.
It's not Ovaltine.
What was the slogan for Ovaltine then?
I have no idea. I've never had Ovaltine in my life.
Neither did I.
Then what are you talking about?
I might be wrong, but
you were
who
so
knows?
wrong.
You might be right.
You were so wrong.
It happens.
Oh my God.
It'll be the first. There's a first time for everything.
I guess so. But yeah, I love, like, if you want to go back and watch a match you watch him win the world title against the Sandman on ECW Hardcore TV. It's on the network. It's the Halloween edition. It's October 31st, 1995, ECW Hardcore TV. And it's the main event. It's a ladder match, which is not a traditional ladder match. It's the title. It's not like the title was hanging above the ring. No. It was just you were allowed to use a ladder to kill your opponent. That was it. But you still had to win by pinfall or submission. And he went in. Mikey Whipwreck wins the title. He's, like I said before, he's 21 at the time where he wins. It's regarded as one of the youngest ever to win a major promotion's top championship. And it's great because, Foley comes out to help him celebrate, and he's barely conscious during the celebration. All these guys in the locker room, they got to lift him up, and he's half asleep, being carried out of the ring on everyone's shoulders. And it's just a cool moment and a pretty cool match against a legendary performer. And there's my guy, Mikey Whipwreck. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a great pick, and welcome to the Hall of Fame, Mikey Whipwreck.
Absolutely. So who do you got next?
There would be no Extreme Championship Wrestling without my next inductee. He is a 4-time heavyweight champion, 2-time TV champion. He was elected into the Hardcore Hall of Fame in 2014. His actions on the day the lines were crossed establishes Extreme Championship Wrestling and puts an end to Eastern Championship Wrestling. He is known for being a member of the Triple Threat, the initial Triple Threat with Malenko and Benoit, and then the second coming with Candido and Brian Lee, who will eventually be replaced with Bam Bam Bigelow. His feuds with Terry Funk, Tommy Dreamer, and the Pitbulls are legendary. The next inductee can be named in one word. He is the franchise. And that's exactly what he was. Welcome to the ECW DDT Archives Hall of Fame, Shane Douglas.
Excellent pick. Excellent. I hated Shane Douglas, and that just, when I hate somebody, it just means that they're really good at their job. And that's how I feel about Shane Douglas. He was really good at making people hate him, and it worked on me because I couldn't frickin' stand him. But like you said, he was the franchise, and he added that level of legitimacy to a circus. And just to be that mainstay, that classic wrestler and it didn't mean he wasn't hardcore and he couldn't hang in those types of matches. He could, but yeah, he just gave that air of, here's our actual wrestler in the land of chairs and barbed wire and ladders and tables and whatnot, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But I love it.
I was not a fan of Shane Douglas at all. I couldn't stand him either. But that doesn't mean you don't recognize what he brought to the company. And again, there would be no ECW without him.
Yeah, he changed the game. and he was the guy that brought ECW to life. Absolutely. On screen. Any other thoughts on Shane Douglas?
Nope. That's
okay.
I mean, I think we hit it.
Yeah, we definitely hit it. Okay, cool. So my other singles competitor is a 5-time ECW World Champion, a 1-time ECW Tag Team Champion. He was inducted into the Hardcore Hall of Fame in 2007. He's got that banner hanging up in the old ECW arena. And here's a guy that, for me, epitomized when everyone thinks of ECW and the type of style and matches and things that you got from that company, you think of this man. And he is an icon, has one of the most iconic entrances in the history of the business. And when you think of hardcore wrestling, you think of the Sandman. And he is my inductee into the ECW Hall of Fame. Because you think of the Sandman, what do you think of? You think of the kendo stick, the cigarette, and the beer coming to the ring. That's what you got. That's it. And nobody else has an entrance like that. And I would put him up against, like, when you think of iconic entrances, it's like The Undertaker. And you can say The Undertaker and everybody else, but Sandman's up there because it's just so memorable. And just the fantastic storylines. You got the Raven storyline that involved his real life son, when he was blinded and he stayed at home for months pretending he was blind and didn't answer the door and didn't leave his house. And oh my God. And it's just, if you're a fan of those hardcore bloody death matches, the Sandman is the godfather to all of that. And he's another guy that would never be on a list of the great workers, quote unquote. And you know how much I don't like that word. But he was as entertaining as it came. And I think when you're thinking of an ECW Hall of Fame, you have to include the Sandman. How do you feel about the Sandman?
I think you left out one of the biggest things that he did in ECW was he created Tommy Dreamer.
Yeah.
That Kane match with the Sandman is what brought Dreamer to life. He is as ECW as ECW gets. He is the original. He did his thing. He did it well. The cracking beer cans on your head till you bleed is just crazy. You went in going, if he's going to do that kind of damage to himself, what is he going to do to his opponent?
Damn straight.
He was believable. I don't think his talent's translated to the other companies, but I do think in ECW he is one of the best ever.
And that's the thing. Yeah, if that's the thing, like you look at, and Mikey Whipwreck was the same way. Like, each of these guys had those cup of coffee in WCW. Sandman maybe a little bit longer than Whipwreck, but it's just they didn't have a place there. They had a place in ECW where they were allowed that freedom to be themselves and allowed what they were, and what Paul Heyman has always done well, which was take the positives in their performers and build off of that. And that's exactly what they did with the Sandman, with Mikey Whipwreck. And there's a great match that I picked out for the Sandman. It's violent as hell. If you like bloody, crazy matches, his match with Sabu at ECW House Party 1998, you can find it on the network. It's a barbed wire ladder match. So there's barbed wire hanging above the ring, and whoever gets it can use it. And the Sandman takes the barbed wire off the thing, and Sabu sends him out pushes the ladder, sends him out onto the floor through 2 tables. Joey Styles thinks he's dead because there's a great story where he tells that he didn't know there were tables there. He thought he just went off the ladder and went onto the concrete and thought he like freaking died. And like the tables are any better, but at least it broke his fall. But if that's your scene, man, it doesn't get much better than those two. And obviously Sabu could be on anybody's list for ECW Hall of Fame too, but I was never as much of a fan of Sabu as I was of Sandman. So that's why I picked him. And It's just a great character in that time, and it doesn't get much better than that. So, who is your final inductee into the ECW Hall of Fame?
The headliner of my group is a one-time heavyweight champion, a 3-time tag team champion with 3 different partners, including Johnny Gunn, Raven, and Masato Tanaka. He was inducted into the Hardcore Hall of Fame in 2010. He is known for being upset when he won the ECW Heavyweight Championship because he felt he never wanted to win the title. He is most known for his feud with Raven over his childhood friend who was Chunky Beulah McGillicuddy, who came back as a Penthouse pet. He is also known for his matches with the aforementioned Sandman with the Kane match, and that man is the hardcore legend, Tommy Dreamer.
The innovator of violence.
Yep.
I love Tommy Dreamer.
He was.
Yeah.
He was the innovator of taking violence. I mean, some of the most memorable moments. You remember when Jerry Lawler came in for a cup of coffee in ECW when the WWE was trying to help him out? And
yeah, the whole crossover
in
thing.
the balls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He actually did damage too.
Tommy Dreamer was that guy that his character was so interesting because here's like the pretty boy white meat baby face that got beat so bad that he had to storyline in real life whatever had to evolve his character and still be that guy but be able to dish it out just to survive. And I think that's very relatable. Sometimes you gotta adapt to survive, and that's exactly what he did. And there's just so many classic matches, and we talked about him like reluctantly becoming champion, and it's terrible because he had to watch all of his buddies leave and go on to greener pastures, or what they thought was greener pastures, and he was the only one that was left. So towards the end, he almost had to win the championship. And I love on a personal standpoint, and this is so cheesy and marky and whatever, but I don't care. There's very few Twitter DMs that I have saved that I've never deleted. And there's 2 that I've saved from complete strangers. One's from Diamond Dallas Page, and one is from Tommy Dreamer. Because I tweeted out one day that I was going back and reliving his feud with Raven, which was one of the great stories in the history of all wrestling, not just ECW, right or wrong.
Absolutely.
And I tweeted that I was going to go back and watch that one from the beginning and kind of go through all the TV and the events. And Tommy Dreamer sent me a DM that just said, enjoy. He didn't like my tweet. He didn't retweet it. I think Raven liked it, but he didn't retweet it. He literally took the time to just write one word to me, enjoy. And that is, I've always held Tommy Dreamer in regard. He's one of my favorite performers of all time. And that sealed it for me. And I thought that was just like a cool little anecdote to your inductee. And like, he's hardcore, and he will always be hardcore. And he's now I would love to go to a House of Hardcore show when all the dust settles from this pandemic crap, and support that promotion. But Tommy Dreamer's the man, and it's very hard to argue about that. Awesome.
You're up with the headliners of the evening.
Yeah, and I know this is kind of I'll admit this is kind of a cop out easy pick, but I felt like I was obscure enough in some of my earlier ones that it absolved me from this one. But it's hard to argue about these guys' place in history, and especially since they've gone on to such great successes everywhere they went. But where they really took off was in ECW, and they are 8-time tag team champions. They are the most decorated tag team of all time, when you think about everywhere they've worked. And they defined that ECW boom in the late 90s, and they parlayed that into legendary status once they moved on. They were vile heels. They would go after fans. They would go after individuals in the crowd. They were just despicable. And that is, I think you know who I'm talking about, the Dudley Boys. And, like we said earlier with the Eliminators, you have to have an iconic finish when it comes to a tag team, a great tandem finisher, and they had that in the 3D. They were so athletic despite their body forms. And, it's just, they just love to watch them and love to watch them just pummel people and get the tables out and light tables on fire and everything like that. And it's just, they spawned the Dudley family. And I challenge anybody to be able to name all the Dudleys. Can you name all the Dudleys? I'm not putting you on the spot. I don't expect you to.
All of them I don't know, because there were some really obscure ones. You got, obviously, Bubba Ray, Devon, Big Dick Dudley. You got Dances with Dudley. You've got Sign Guy Dudley. You've got, let's see, who else? Spike Dudley.
Yeah, well, you named a lot of them. The only ones you missed were Chubby, Snot, and Dudley Dudley.
I was going to hit up Dudley Dudley. I did know him. I didn't know the other two. That's not bad, though.
No, that was really good, actually. And I go back to how awful they were and just believable they were as heels. And it's, I go back to their last night in ECW. They were the tag team champions, and everyone knew they were leaving. And they vowed to leave that promotion with the tag titles and lay the belts at Vince McMahon's feet. And it was a great storytelling and transparency and all that, and kind of pulling the curtain back. And, they used that as a way to even, they were hot and hated anyway, just to get even more heat, because they sold out. And, there was no tearful goodbye. There was no, applause. No, it was good riddance. Get out of here. You guys we hate you. And it goes back to your last honoree is Tommy Dreamer. He comes out to defend ECW's honor, and he fights them 2-on-1. And as he's about to lose, out comes his arch nemesis Raven for the assist and to beat the Dudleys and to become tag champions and not let them walk out with the belts. And it's a classic moment and a fitting end to the Dudleys in ECW. You can catch that one on the network. It's the August 26, 1999 episode of ECW. And it's like, yeah, they had, you can look at their feuds with Edge and Christian. You can look at their feuds with the Hardys and the classic TLC matches and everything they were able to do in WWE, everything they were able to do in TNA. But we don't get there without their run in ECW. And that's where their legend began. And that's why they're like almost a too obvious pick to be in the ECW Hall of Fame, the DDT Archives ECW Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts about that? Because you weren't the biggest fan of them, right?
No, I actually wasn't. I mean, I respected their work. Let me state that out clearly. They were the ultimate bad guys. Their promos were ridiculous.
Yeah.
The stuff Bubba Ray would say to the girls in the crowd. And then the little boys sitting next to the girls. Ooh. They do not age well. But it stirred up the hardcore fans like no other. Fun fact, Devon Dudley and I are fraternity brothers. Who knew?
Yeah.
It didn't help me get backstage or to meet them, but, it's still a reality 20 years later. They're great. They're absolutely one of the greatest tag teams of all time. They're probably the greatest faction in ECW history. I loved listening to Joel Gertner announce them, because Joel Gertner was just the king of raunchy. If you want to watch an ECW pay-per-view for anything, it's watch them for the Joel Gertner introduction. They deserve it. them and Dreamer are ECW. They made the company what they were. And they will forever be known as ECW guys. You know, when you walk into an arena today and the Dudley Boys show up, you don't hear the crowd chant Dudleys. You hear ECW, ECW, ECW. Same thing when Dreamer shows up.
Same thing with Sandman.
Yep,
Like
absolutely.
it's the way it is, and that's how it should be, and that's why we picked all these guys, because they, like as we said at the top, they were the heart and soul of these companies, this company, and its success that it had. And even though it was maybe on a smaller scale than WCW was, from WWF was, their voices were loud enough to be heard. And Paul Heyman deserves a lot of the credit for these guys, because he saw in them what nobody else would let themselves see. And yeah, like we're not going to induct Paul Heyman to ECW. He's the lord of the land. Like it's his company. We don't need to induct him into the Hall of Fame. But what I'm saying is his vision for these guys and understanding what needed to be done to make them successful and to make his show better. You saw this in a lot of guys, and the other promotions were not willing to see that. And that's the genius of Paul Heyman in a nutshell, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to hit you with the trivia question.
Yay, I love trivia questions.
Okay. So, how long was Tommy Dreamer the heavyweight champion of ECW?
It was like a minute, right?
30 minutes if you include the match.
30 minutes. Wow. Who beat him? Just Incredible?
Just Incredible, and then my first inductee, Francine, turned on Dreamer and joined Credible.
Oh, okay. Oh man, that's good stuff. Just Incredible, maybe a future inductee here too. There's maybe a lot of guys.
I don't know. There's still a deep group of people that people could argue with our picks, because there is the golden dozen.
Yeah. And we invite you to do that. So really hit us up on Twitter. We'll put it out when the show's released of who would you be your first ballot Hall of Famers for ECW. And like, we'd like to hear your ideas. I'm sure it's guys that made our first cut. But we want to hear from you. It's a great discussion point. We love ECW, and we hope you do too. So, of course, hit us up on our Twitter page at DDT Archives. You can hit up Chris and shoot him a follow at Chris_DDTHSLB. You can find all of our shows on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Just type in DDT Archives, and all of our links are up on our website, highspotsandlowblows.com. Any other final thoughts? You want to move forward? Anything you want to touch on for this episode? Current events, anything like that?
I'm just going to leave it at, this was a really fun show to do. I know it's a little bit shorter than some of the ones that our fans are getting used to hearing from us, but I think because of the parameters we gave ourselves, only inducting a small group of people, we were able to keep it legitimate. It was difficult to decide who belonged, which is how it should be. It should never be an easy decision. For a Hall of Fame. If it is, then the parameters are way too wide.
Yeah, so, no, I agree with you. And that's kind of what the basis, like the heart of our podcast is. I always found it's easy to, hey, I'm gonna watch Raw tonight, I'm gonna watch Raw, I'm gonna watch AEW, I'm gonna watch NXT, I'm gonna watch this show, and I'm gonna talk about it. I find that too easy. And if that bothers you, too bad, because I just found just doing recaps of what's going on and week to week just gets monotonous, and it gets so it's boring to me. But going back and having to find little snippets of moments and doing the research and watching old shows and seeing where guys ended up and seeing the evolution of these characters, these legendary characters, that's what's fun to me. And I don't want this podcast to be easy when it comes to subject matter. I don't want it to be mundane. I want it to be fun, and I know you want the same thing, and I want our listeners to have fun with it, because that's what wrestling should be. It should be fun. It should not feel like a job to watch wrestling and I'm not trying to, fantasy book this or rewrite that, or, oh, this guy should have won, or break, like, no, stop. No, that's not what we're all about. We're about bringing the past to the present and remembering what it was like to be. I don't want to be anything more than a fan. I don't want to be a critic. I don't want to be a writer. I don't want to be a booker. I don't want to rebook things. No. I just want to be a fan and talk happily about a sport that I love. And I'm sorry I got up on my soapbox for that one, buddy.
No problem, man. You're absolutely right. And, we brought this podcast back because we wanted to do it, first and foremost. We love that people enjoy listening, but it allows us to talk about what we really, truly enjoy. And today's show definitely is something that was near and dear to our hearts. It was an important piece in our friendship. And for those of you that don't know, we've been friends now for almost 35 years. And I mean, it's the truth. We played Little League together and our dad's coach together from the time we were like 5.
I'm not a wrestling fan without you and your brother. That's just the God's honest truth.
100% true. And that my brother's kind of the forgotten brother in this adventure. Is it originally started as my brother and Gregg, and as my brother didn't have time because of family commitments, I slid in, and I don't think we skipped a beat.
No.
Our love of wrestling is legitimate. Do sometimes I get a little arrogant in the fact that I know more than I think some people on Twitter that like to pound their chest and say that they're, the greatest fans of all time. Yeah, that's great, but I still know more than you. Doesn't make me better than you, just means I know more than you.
No, but even still, I'll take passion over knowledge a lot of the time. And I think that's where I come in. My passion is huge, and my love for the sport is big. And what I'm trying to make up for in knowledge and history, and I love. We both are history buffs, and that's what I think. The heart of this is going back and just learning. And it's like in our last episode, when we talked about Starrcade, I'd never seen that show, but I loved it, and I loved going back, and it was new to me, and just being able to, and there was even doing the research with this show, it's like I saw stuff just in my adventures and doing a deep dive that I had never seen before, and it was great. It's great. So that's the level we kind of want to take this to, is give that fan perspective, follow that passion and that knowledge, and combine all those things to make a fun podcast for everybody to listen to. So once again, give us a follow on Twitter. Hit us up on Twitter at DDT Archives, at Chris_DDTHSLB. Any show suggestions anything you want us to cover? What do you feel? Who do you want to be in your ECW Hall of Fame? And we'll love to talk to you about that. All right, man. Any final thoughts before we bow out?
Just thanks for listening. Hope you really enjoyed this week's show as much as we enjoyed giving it to you.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time on the DDT Archives.